When an old, battered valise sat unnoticed at a train station, except by a thin stray dog, he sensed something and protectively guarded it, growling at anyone who came too close. Enya, a local bakery owner, noticed the dog's unusual vigilance and investigated. What was shocking about this battered valise? What was found in this battered valise? The old valise was an unnoticed stain. It rested near the station's grimy rear exit. Forgotten? Battered. Its cheap faux leather was a tapestry of scuffs. Scratches crisscrossed its surface. Dirt was ingrained in every crevice. It could have been mistaken for discarded refuse. Thousands of hurried footsteps echoed past it that Tuesday. A relentless river of humanity. Some commuters instinctively detoured around its bulk. Others, lost in their own thoughts, barely registered its shabby presence. No one afforded it a second glance. No one considered its silent story. Almost no one. One pair of eyes did stop. They belonged to a stray, a canine ghost haunting the station's periphery. He was painfully thin. His fur, once perhaps a sandy gold, was matted, caked with mud and city grime. His ribs formed sharp ridges beneath his hide, a stark reminder of constant hunger. One ear was torn, a ragged banner from some forgotten battle. His tail, kinked at an odd angle from an injury long since healed, twitched nervously. Years of hardship clung to him. They were a second, invisible skin. He bore no name, wore no collar, knew no home. He was an anonymous survivor, a testament to resilience in a harsh world. Yet something about that specific valise arrested his attention. He paused his endless, weary patrol. He sniffed the air, once, then a second, more deliberate inhalation. His damp nose quivered. He began to circle the valise, slowly, cautiously. His lean, scarred body tensed. His eyes, usually dulled by the daily struggle for existence, narrowed. A spark of ancient, primal alertness ignited within them. Then, with a quiet sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, he sat. He positioned himself directly beside the forlorn piece of luggage. He refused to budge. The human tide continued to flow. It headed around his still form. Most ignored him completely. He was just another piece of urban detritus. Some commuters, startled by his sudden stillness, muttered curses. One irate vendor from a nearby snack kiosk, his patience worn thin by the city's relentless demands, launched a worn-out sneaker. It thudded harmlessly a few feet away. The dog didn't flinch. He didn't run. His resolve was absolute. Each time a curious footstep strayed too close to the valise, a low growl rumbled in his chest. It wasn't a sound of outright anger. It was a warning. Deep, protective, intensely focused. He seemed to possess a knowledge, a secret the bustling, oblivious world around him could not perceive. The hours bled into one another. The weak afternoon sun began its slow descent. Long, skeletal shadows crept across the cracked concrete of the station concourse. The air, already cool, began to acquire a sharper, autumnal bite. The stray remained, a silent, furry sentinel, a lone guardian at an abandoned post. Across the bustling thoroughfare, Enya was preparing to close the little bakery she managed. The lingering aroma of yeast, sugar, and cooling bread still hung heavy in the air, a comforting, familiar scent. She meticulously wiped down the stainless steel counters. She emptied the crumb-filled trays. She had noticed the sandy-colored stray before. Many times, he was a recurring, melancholy motif in her daily urban landscape. Often, she'd see him rummaging with a desperate hope through the bins behind her shop, or curled up, trying to find a moment's respite near the overflowing commercial dumpsters, a familiar, poignant figure of neglect. But this evening, something was markedly different. He wasn't engaged in his usual nomadic wanderings. He wasn't scavenging for discarded morsels. He was static, vigilant. He was guarding something. An inexplicable tug, a knot of unease, formed in Anya's stomach, a gut feeling she couldn't articulate but couldn't ignore. It compelled her to investigate. She hesitated for a moment. The station, especially as dusk bled into night, wasn't always the most welcoming of places. Shadows could conceal more than just inanimate objects, but the dog's uncharacteristic stillness, his unwavering focus, exerted a strange pull on her. She locked the bakery door. She clutched her worn handbag a little tighter. She crossed the street, the roar of evening traffic momentarily dimming as she neared the station's less used rear entrance. The dog turned his head sharply as she approached. his remaining good ear pricked forward. His amber eyes met hers. They were not wild, nor were they filled with the aggression born of fear she often saw in strays. Instead, they held an expression of profound, pleading urgency, a silent, desperate message. If he were a piece of software, an alert icon would have been flashing insistently. Her human intuition, honed by years of observing the city's subtle dramas, did the same. Anya's gaze shifted from the dog to the valise. It was just an old, cheap piece of luggage. Nothing remarkable. Then her eyes returned to the dog. He took a single, deliberate step backward. It was a clear invitation, an act of trust. As if he were ceding his post to her, giving her space to understand. Anya crouched down. Her knees creaked in protest against the cold, unforgiving concrete. She extended a hesitant hand. Her fingertips, chilled by the evening air, brushed against the dusty, cracked vinyl of the valise. At first, she felt nothing, just the cold, inert material of a forgotten object. Then, a faint tremor. So slight, it was almost imperceptible. The valise seemed to shiver, just a fraction. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs with a sudden, fierce rhythm. An icy tendril of fear, sharp and unexpected, prickled its way up her spine. She pressed her ear against the rough fabric of the valise. The cheap material felt coarse against her cheek. The distant sounds of the station announcements, train whistles, the murmur of crowds seemed to recede. A second ticked by, then another, and then she heard it, a whimper, incredibly faint, muffled, almost lost in the ambient noise, but unmistakable, the cry of a baby. Anya gasped, a sharp intake of disbelief and horror. Then she screamed, "Help! Oh my God, somebody help me!" Her voice, usually modulated and calm, cracked with panic. It echoed unnaturally in the cavernous space of the station's rear passage. People stopped. Heads previously bent over phones or focused on destinations turned. The relentless river of human indifference faltered. A uniformed station guard, his face etched with lines of concern and surprise, hurried towards her. He fumbled with the radio clipped to his belt. His voice, when he spoke into it, was tight with urgency, calling the police, describing an unbelievable situation. Within minutes, the distinctive, piercing wail of sirens sliced through the evening clamor. Flashing blue and red lights strobed across the station walls. They painted the scene in stark, moving patterns of alarm. Police officers, their faces serious and alert, were the first to arrive. They were followed closely by a team of paramedics, their medical bags held ready. Their expressions were grim, professional, ready for anything. They approached the valise with caution. The dog, now a few feet away, watched them. His body was still tense. His gaze flickered between the officers and the valise. An officer, a woman with kind eyes but a firm demeanor, knelt. She unzipped the valise, slowly, carefully. The metallic rasp of the zipper seemed deafeningly loud in the sudden, expectant hush that had fallen over the small crowd of onlookers. Inside, wrapped in a soiled, threadbare towel that offered little warmth, lay a newborn baby girl. Her skin was a shocking porcelain white, so terribly, unnaturally pale. Her tiny, perfectly formed lips trembled. Her breathing was shallow, a mere flutter in her fragile chest. She had been abandoned there for hours, zipped into darkness, silent, invisible to everyone, that is, except for the nameless stray dog. The baby was whisked away to the city hospital. The ambulance's lights flashed urgently. Its siren screamed a path through the congested evening traffic. She was warmed, stabilized, surrounded by the beeping and whirring machinery of the neonatal intensive care unit. Doctors and nurses worked with quiet, focused intensity. Later, one of the senior pediatricians, a woman with tired but compassionate eyes, found Anya in the waiting room. If she had been found even an hour later, the doctor said, her voice grave, she likely would not have survived. An hour, such a small, fleeting measure of time, yet it had been the chasm between life and an unthinkable death. They gave the baby a name chosen by the nurses who had fought for her life. Nova, a new star, a tiny, unexpected beacon of light in the overwhelming darkness of her arrival. The dog, once an anonymous shadow in the city's landscape, was carefully coaxed into a crate by a gentle animal control officer. He was taken to a local animal shelter. The staff there, their hearts moved by the incredible story that quickly circulated, named him Hero. It seemed fitting, for his quiet bravery, for his unwavering, inexplicable vigil. News of the rescue spread with astonishing speed. Like wildfire through the city's consciousness, the story of the baby in the valise, the strayed dog who had stood guard, it captured the public imagination. People were profoundly touched. Donations poured into the shelter, food for Hero. Soft toys he sniffed at with cautious curiosity, warm, clean blankets to replace the cold concrete he knew. Some called him a miracle, an angel in disguise. Anya found she could not stop thinking about them. About little Nover, fighting for life in an incubator. About Hero, alone in a shelter cage, however kind his current keepers. They were inextricably linked in her mind. An unlikely trio, thrown together by an act of shocking desperation, and an equally shocking act of selfless loyalty. She began to visit the shelter regularly. Hero would greet her with a soft, tentative whine. His crooked tail would offer a shy, hopeful wag. His ember eyes, still holding a trace of their old sadness, now also held a flickering ember of trust, a dawning recognition. Anya would sit with him in the small, sterile visiting area. She would talk to him in soft, soothing tones. She would gently stroke his matted fur. Slowly working through the tangles, she saw the gentle, noble soul hidden beneath the layers of hardship and neglect. When the mandatory holding period passed, and all the necessary paperwork was meticulously completed, Anya brought Hero home. Her small, tidy apartment, usually a haven of quiet solitude, felt a little warmer, a little fuller, a little more alive. Hero, initially bewildered by the softness of a rug, the consistent presence of food, the gentle touch of a hand that asked for nothing in return, slowly began to relax. He claimed a spot on an old blanket by the radiator. He learned the rhythm of Anya's days. Weeks later, Anya saw a small, unassuming notice pinned to the community board at her local library. Nover, now stable and growing stronger, needed a foster home. Anya's heart gave a familiar, decisive lurch. It felt like the closing of a circle. She applied without a second thought. The process was long, involved, filled with interviews, home visits, and mountains of forms. But Anya persisted, driven by a sense she couldn't quite name, a sense of responsibility, a sense of connection. Months slipped by, more paperwork, more anxious waiting, more hopeful anticipation. Then, one crisp, sun-drenched autumn afternoon, Nover came home. Home to Anya's small apartment. Home to Hero. Today they are, undeniably, a family. Nover's laughter, bright and infectious, now fills the once quiet rooms. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. Hero follows her everywhere. A steadfast, furry shadow, his crooked tail wags almost constantly. His amber eyes are watchful, always watchful. He still lies beside her crib every night. He positions himself between her and the door, guarding her still. His self-appointed duty never truly ended. It had merely shifted its focus. Anya often pauses in her day to simply look at them, her daughter, her miraculous, resilient Nover, her dog, her brave, devoted Hero. She believes, with a certainty that settles deep in her bones, that it was no mere accident. Perhaps it was fate, or destiny, or perhaps something quieter, more profound. The universe working in its mysterious, often incomprehensible ways. She knows that not all heroes wear badges, or capes, or announce their presence with fanfare. Some have fur, often matted and dirty. Some carry the visible and invisible scars of a difficult past. Some stand quietly, steadfastly, by the things others forget, the lives others discard. They wait patiently, until someone finally listens, until someone finally truly sees. And maybe, just maybe, Anya thinks that is what true love really is. Not the loudest declaration, not the biggest, most ostentatious gesture, but the quiet, unwavering, persistent act, the simple, profound act of showing up, of being present, of caring when no one else will. The day that cheap valise was abandoned at the station, the world, in its careless haste, nearly failed a tiny, precious life, a life that had barely begun. But a dog, a creature who himself had been failed 1,000 times over by that same world, did not. He remembered, perhaps in some deep, instinctual part of his being, what it meant to be vulnerable. He understood, in a way that transcended language, what it meant to be utterly alone. And in his own silent, resolute, extraordinary way, he refused to let it happen again, not on his watch, not while he still drew breath. Hero had never truly known a consistently kind hand before Anya. Every morsel of food had been a battle won. Every moment of warmth, a fleeting, stolen comfort. The city for him had been a sprawling labyrinth of indifference and occasional cruelty. Yet when confronted with that closed, abandoned valise, he hadn't seen it as a potential, albeit cramped, shelter from the Colonel. He hadn't seen it as a place to rest his perpetually weary bones. He had sensed life, fragile, helpless, precious, and he had responded with an instinct as old as time itself, an instinct to protect the vulnerable. Anya sometimes wondered about the person, the mother, who had left Nova. She tried not to judge, though a cold knot of anger sometimes tightened in her chest. She imagined a story of desperation, of fear, of a mind pushed beyond its limits. She would likely never know the truth, but what she did know, with absolute certainty, was that Nova was safe now. More than safe. She was loved, utterly and unconditionally cherished. The initial days with Nova in the apartment were a whirlwind of new routines, feedings at all hours, endless nappy changes. The bone-deep weariness of interrupted sleep. Through it all, Hero was a constant, calming, reassuring presence. When Nova cried with the inconsolable distress of an infant, Hero would rise from his blanket. He would nudge Anya's hand with his cool, wet nose. A gentle reminder, she needs you. When Anya, overwhelmed and exhausted, would slump onto the sofa, he would lay his heavy head in her lap, a silent, profound offering of comfort and solidarity. As Nova grew from a fragile newborn into a curious, determined toddler, her bond with Hero solidified into something truly special. Her first genuine, bubbling giggle was elicited when Hero, with a sigh of canine resignation, allowed her to tug gently on his good ear. Her first recognizable word, after the essential "Mama," was a happy, gurgled sound that bore a remarkable resemblance to Hero. He tolerated her often clumsy, enthusiastic affections with an almost saintly patience. She would attempt to share her sticky, half-eaten teething biscuits with him. He would sniff politely and then gently turn his head away. The local park became their shared sanctuary. Nova, taking her first wobbly, triumphant steps, would chase pigeons with shrieks of delight. Hero would amble faithfully beside her, a watchful, sandy-colored shadow, ever alert to any perceived threat, whether a boisterous larger dog or an errant football. Other parents in the park would often smile. Some of them knew parts of their story, whispered in hushed, admiring tones. They saw the unwavering devotion in the old stray's eyes. They saw the unblemished, joyful innocence in the rescued child's bright laughter. Anya's regular customers at the bakery, who had followed the story from its dramatic beginnings, often asked for updates. "How's our little star, Nova, doing?" one would inquire. "And that incredible Hero dog of yours," another would add. Anya would smile, a genuine, happy smile that reached her eyes. She would share small, heartwarming anecdotes. Nova's latest discovered word, Hero's endearing habit of herding Nova away from the staircase. Her life had undergone a profound transformation. From a quiet, orderly, perhaps slightly solitary existence, it had blossomed into a beautiful, sometimes chaotic, always love-filled adventure. Sometimes, late at night, when Nova was finally asleep in her little bed, her soft breaths filling the quiet room, and Hero was a warm, reassuring, gently snoring presence at its foot, Anya would sit by her living room window. She would gaze out at the sprawling constellation of city lights. She would marvel at the sheer improbability of it all. A discarded valise, a forgotten stray dog, a woman who had thought her life was settled, all forged, unexpectedly, into a family, bound together by threads of shared vulnerability, unimaginable cruelty, and an extraordinary, life-affirming loyalty. She had learned that love didn't always arrive with grand pronouncements or dramatic flourishes. Sometimes, it trotted in quietly, on four tired paws, with matted fur and eyes that pleaded for a chance. Sometimes, the most profound connections were found in the most unlikely of places, hidden away in the shadows, waiting patiently to be discovered by a heart willing to see. Hero never entirely lost his street-honed watchfulness. Every new person who approached Nova, every unfamiliar sound, was met with a low, almost inaudible rumble in his chest, a fixed, unwavering gaze. It was never aggressive, but it was unmistakably clear. This child, his posture declared, is under my protection. He was her unwavering guardian, her first and truest friend, her steadfast, furry older brother. Nova, in turn, adored him with the fierce, uncomplicated love of a child. She drew him countless pictures, smudged crayon masterpieces depicting a sandy-colored dog with a distinctively crooked tail and one floppy ear. She sang him made-up songs, tuneless and nonsensical to adult ears, but filled with an undeniable affection that Hero seemed to understand perfectly. She whispered her most important secrets into his good ear, confiding her small triumphs and tiny sorrows, secure in the knowledge that he would keep them safe. Anya knew their story was more than just a local news item that had briefly captured the city's attention. It was a small, shining testament, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, to the good that could still emerge, unexpected and powerful, in a world that often felt overwhelmingly harsh and indifferent. It was a poignant reminder that even the most overlooked, the most discarded beings could possess the greatest, most courageous hearts, that true heroism didn't require a pedigree, or a pristine past, or even a human voice. The old, battered valise itself was long gone, taken as evidence, then, presumably, consigned to some anonymous city incinerator. But its dark legacy had been unexpectedly transformed. It lived on, in the joyous, unrestrained laughter of a thriving child, in the soft, devoted gaze of an aging dog, in the quiet, profound gratitude of a woman who had discovered her true purpose, her real family, against all conceivable odds, in the bustling, indifferent heart of a great city, near the grimy back entrance of a noisy train station, where one forgotten, four-legged soul had steadfastly refused to allow another, even more helpless soul, to be truly lost to the uncaring world.